within my family, my dad was an alcoholic, and so wasn't around a whole lot, and when he was around, things weren't really great. And within my own and extended family, we had lots of death and divorce just all throughout. And personally for me, the most life-changing moment that I experienced was when I was 16 years old. One of my older sisters, who was 18 at the time, named Tracy, was a freshman in college, and she was driving home from school to surprise us one weekend, and she lost control of her car, and she was killed on impact. And that sent me into a very steep, fast, downward spiral. And so in addition to those things in my life, I struggled with a lot of the same things that I feel like we probably all do/did. Anxious thoughts about what the opposite sex thinks about you, grades, fitting in different friend groups, living up to others' expectations. Personally, I struggled with anger issues, depression, a gambling problem, and suicidal thoughts. And in feeling so terrible about myself and about my life, I often wondered the big questions, like why are we here? What is my purpose? And is this ever going to get any easier? Have you ever asked those questions? Yeah? And in my hurt, I decided three things about God. And I say this with an exclamation point. It's not an exclamation point. Quotation marks. That I believe that God was not real. If He is real, He hates me. And people who believe in God have made up this fairy tale so they can sleep at night. And this three-headed theological monster that I had is what I shared at the first ever Chi Alpha small group meeting I went to as a student. Small group leaders, are you glad I'm not in small group? Yes. Everyone was sharing their stories, all what Jesus done in their life, back it up. I shared that. It was awesome. It was awesome to me. They all probably felt really weird. But when I met Chi Alpha, I was 19 years old and I was an atheist. And although I believed opposite of what these friends in Chi Alpha believed, I was welcomed with open arms, and they often talked about Jesus. Very much like Rob and Mariah talked about last week. Did you guys get to come last week? Yeah. Mariah, man, they did so good. I loved it. Covering Mark 1-4, this first quarter of the story of Jesus. That's what we're going to keep looking at, this life of Jesus. And they mentioned it, that Jesus was a polarizing figure, and everyone had an opinion about it. Right? He healed all who came to Him, forgave people of their sins, casted out demons. He challenged age-old traditions. And some thanked Him for it and thought perhaps He was divine, while others called Him, quote, out of His mind and possessed by Satan himself. I don't know if you can get a whole lot more polarizing than that. And back then, everybody had thoughts about Jesus because He was doing what He was doing right here in the flesh. They heard His sermons, they saw the miracles happen, whether it happened to them directly or somebody they knew. They were experiencing all of these things that He was doing because He was right there in front of them. But for a lot of us, this Jesus subject has become out of sight, out of mind. And because He's not right here in the flesh doing this in front of me, I don't really have much of an opinion. But if you're like me, as a college student, you are hungry for truth. You want to know what is true. And what I'm learning more and more, that I'm not alone in this, that people are hungry not just to know, how can I say this? They're not just hungry to know, like, the truth, like, what is it? But they want to know the truth. Does that make sense? You know, like when you know something, you know of something, and then you have an intimate knowledge, and you're like, yeah, I know that. You know? And where you look for that, you're going to hear a whole lot of different answers, like I did, to those big questions. Right? And you'll hear about Muhammad, you'll hear about Krishna, you'll hear about Jesus, you'll hear about the flying spaghetti monster. Have you heard of the gospel of the flying spaghetti monster? No. Some, yes? Okay. Real cars. I remember back in college, the secular student group would come on campus and they would street preach the same way the Christians would, but they would remove Jesus and they put in the flying spaghetti monster. The troll, right? I know. Didn't make a whole lot of sense. But their point was, well, you can't see Jesus, you can't introduce me to him. How do you know he's not a flying spaghetti monster? Ridiculous. Yes. It's weird. But whatever the truth is, I wanted to know what the truth was. Even if it was something outside of what I thought it might be, or it exceeded my expectations, or was less than my expectations, I wanted to know what the truth was. So I'm in college as an atheist, and not an intellectual one, but I was an atheist just like a hurt child. You know, if you've been around a hurt child, they're just kind of bitter and sunken and sullen and sad. And that's where I was in my atheism, because I believed in this American prosperity gospel that God is there to make your life really easy. He's a whole lot more like a genie in a bottle that's to grant your wishes than he is the God that I know now. And very quickly, I went from atheism to agnosticism because I realized that I didn't have enough faith to be an atheist. So an atheist says, there is no God. An agnostic says, there's a higher power, but I don't know what it is. And for me, when I look at everything on this earth, anything that's been created, anything that you can see with your eyes, we conclude that there was an intelligent mind that created what's in front of you. Right? The chair you're sitting in, the pen you're holding, this microphone, it was made with a purpose by a mind. You don't look at your phone and think, oh, there was an explosion in an electronics factory. And look, here's this really high-tech, complicated computer, and it just exploded there. Right? You don't sit in class with your textbook that's got numbered pages, paragraphs, words that make sense, facts that check out, colors, pictures, everything there, and think, oh man, Jim and Dwight, they finally did it. They blew up Edward Mifflin. And here's my textbook. Right? You don't think that. When you see anything, you know. That was an Office reference. I see if you want to share this. If you've never seen The Office, thank you. Okay. I saw a couple literally go like this. That's a great joke. But I could see, intrinsically, I knew, I think we all do, that there's an intelligent mind behind the creation. And when you look at people, I think, man, there's got to be an intelligent mind behind that. And so I began an honest search. I went to small group every week. My small group leader got me a Bible, taught me how to read it, taught me how to pray. I had a million questions about everything. Not growing up in the church world, coming and seeing people worship was very odd, very strange to me. Seeing guys say things to each other like, hey, I love you, bro, was super weird. But in small group, I could ask those questions. And so my earnest search for God, I had trouble with prayer. And I feel like I'm not alone in this. Do you guys ever have trouble staying focused while you're praying? Okay, I thought that was pretty safe to be vulnerable and throw that out there. Hope that no one's like, oh, sinner. And I was having trouble staying focused, and so someone suggested to me, you should write down your prayers. I was like, that's pretty good. And so I started to do just that. And I still have them to this day. And one of my favorite prized possessions, one of those where they're like, your house is burning down, what would you go grab? For me, this is one of the things that I would go grab. These are so special to me. I want to share it with you tonight. So we've got a picture of one. And so my handwriting is atrocious, so you don't have to try to read it, but I time-stamped it because I was serious. Time-stamping was cool. February 6, 2010, 11:30 p.m. down to the minute. And I don't know if you can tell, but I wrote, dear, this is the bottom of the page, so I had written it to you before this, but I wrote, dear TWINC, which is shorthand for to whom it may concern. No lie, I can't make this stuff up. I was earnest and I was honest. I was pretty foolish, but I was honest and I was earnest, and God will always honor that. You are honest with Him, He will very famous book called Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. And very quickly in reading it, I realized, oh, I'm the devil. Like, wow, this guy's really, really smart. And he was an atheist for a long time, and this is kind of his talks on how he came to know Jesus and philosophy of Christianity. Wonderful read, you should read it. But as I was reading it, there's this really famous part of the book where he presents this thought process, if you will, this premise, I guess. And he says, if you read about Jesus, the stories we just talked about that Robert Mariah showed last week, all the incredible polarizing things that he did, there are three logical conclusions you could come to about Jesus. And the first one is that he was a liar. Just a con man. Secondly, he's a lunatic. Crazy person. Or three, he is the Lord. And he is who he says he is. A popular opinion of the day, about 100 years ago, and it's still a popular opinion today, is that, well, Jesus was a good moral teacher, like, he's a good guy with, like, good principles, and, like, you should listen to him, but, like, God, all that stuff, I don't know. And Lewis basically just makes the point that if someone's sitting there next to you, like right here, right now, today, you went and walked around with him for a day, and they started casting demons out, and they started touching deaf people and they could hear, and they were touching blind people and they could see, and then they looked at you and they said, oh yeah, that's because I've existed from the beginning, I'm God. When you introduce them to a friend later, hey, here's my friend Cody, he thinks he's God. Like, that's crazy. If that don't put that on me, sorry, because I just saw you just living you're just like, oh, Lee. And so you're like, that's your middle name is Lee. Wow. Cody Lee is God Lee. Anyway. But does that make sense? To see what Jesus did and to just say, oh yeah, he's pretty cool. A person who claims that and does those things is a dangerous person. That person needs to be dealt with seriously. You see what I'm saying? So seriously as in, if he's claiming to be God, maybe he is. And if he's not God, then this person needs to be done away with. This person's dangerous and menace to society. You with me? Make sense? And so, in this search for truth, about 6 to 8 months of reading every day, praying every day, having conversations, having debates with people, the Lord met me by myself in my room, open Bible, and a hungry heart. That was it. I had no preacher preaching, no fog machine, no fancy light show. The Lord just met me where I was at, and He spoke to me all the truth and knowledge that I had been learning, that was all up here, downloaded into my heart. And it was revealed to me who He was and who I was to Him. And like the greatest surgeon ever, He not only took out all of the depression and suicidal thoughts and anxiety and worry and bitterness, but then He replaced it with the Spirit. And real joy, real peace, real love flooded into my life. And I was saved. I was saved from sin and myself. And one of the beautiful things in the Bible, the word saved, a synonym to help us understand it is the word salvaged. So like recycled. So something is recycled and it's salvaged and it's repurposed. That's one of the words for saved. And so for me, from a person who just walked through life terrified and wouldn't really do anything for anyone else, I now was free to love people, to serve people, and now I'm married, a wife, we have 4 kids, we have 1 on the way. What do you do to some of you? What do you do to some of you? Yeah, I got 1 on the way. And it's so wonderful. And we're getting to raise our kids in an environment that I didn't have. And that is like the coolest. It's a little scary sometimes, but it's like the coolest thing. That y'all seen Inside Out? Yeah. You know, like the core memories? You know, and I look back and so many of my core memories, they were totally without God, and so they're like painful, hard memories. And the core memories from my kids are like beautiful, wonderful things, hanging out here. Lynn is right here, front and center. Lynn is our oldest. She's our first. She's 8 years old, and she's amazing. And we offered her to be able to come. She's like, what's I want to go? I'm like, where do you want to sit? She's like, front row. All right. And what's so sweet about her recently, she started writing down prayers to the Lord, which is really cool. And there's one right over here, and you can see it. We have the same handwriting. But you see it says, "Dear God, you have been so good to us and to the whole wide world. Please let everyone believe in you. You are good to me. You are smart. You are amazing. You are the greatest guy ever. Love you." So sweet. Oh, the Lord is good. He will speak to you, He will meet you, and He will change your life. So we're going to keep going through Mark tonight, Mark chapter 5 through 8. And if you read that this week, you may have noticed there is a whole lot of content in those 4 chapters. Depending on how you slice it, how you look at it, there's about 15 different scenes within the Gospel of Mark. And so if we were going to cover every single one of them tonight, we might be here that couple hours, Luke. But I told you we wouldn't be a couple hours, right? So I wanted to do a little 30-second snapshot of 4 different of the stories with a little one-sentence takeaway from those stories. Does that make sense? Are you ready? Rob, you ready? You shook your head no and yawned. It's not a good sign. Now he's ready. Okay. Avery, you ready? All right. This first one. Have you all ever seen this? This is called the Action Bible. It's really cool. The same guys who did the Marvel comics helped do this Bible. It's pretty cool. So this is the Action Bible. These first 2 are from there. So the first one we read was the feeding of the 5,000. Jesus preaches to a crowd of people for hours and they grow hungry. Jesus takes the kids' lunch of some bread and fish and multiplies it to feed thousands. Jesus not only fills our heart with truth, but also our bellies with food. Come on. Next one, the legion. Jesus encounters a man who is possessed by a legion of demons that cause him to cut himself. Upon seeing Jesus, the demons beg him not to torture them. So he casts them out of the man into a herd of nearby pigs. The man is now perfectly sane, and the people who witness this miracle are afraid, and they ask Jesus to leave. Conclusion. If you think interacting with demons is scary, wait till you meet God himself. Jesus is walking on water. He's by himself praying with his Father while his disciples are out on a lake in the middle of the night. The wind and waves grow rough, and these fishermen become afraid. Then they see Jesus walking on the water and cry out in terror. They think he's a ghost. Jesus gets in their boat, and immediately the wind and the waves cease. Conclusion, even the weather succumbs to the touch of the Prince of Peace. Lastly, there's a woman who reaches out to touch Jesus' robe. A woman who had constant bleeding for 12 years, lived in suffering because the doctors of the day could not help her. She fights through a crowd and touches Jesus' robe in desperate faith. The moment she touches him, the bleeding ceases. The most wise and advanced doctors could not help her. Conclusion, one touch of the great physician's robe, and she is healed. And in flying over these scenes, I don't want us to forget that these are individual lives of people that were changed forever. Because Jesus did these miracles so often, there's a temptation for them to become common. And if you see him perform a miracle like that, you go, oh yeah, he did that last week. But understand, if you were that person, understand if you are that person, if you've been saved, you've been delivered by Jesus, these testimonies, the rest of their life, this is what they went through the rest of their life talking about. And they all had one thing in common. They had an encounter with Jesus. And the people witnessing these events had lots of thoughts about Jesus. Rob mentioned it last week. Polarizing thoughts about him. Here are some gems from these 4 chapters to give you a little bit of an idea what it was like to be there in the midst of Jesus' ministry. First, it says that the people in his hometown were offended by him. He comes in healing people, casting out demons, and the hometown he grew up in is offended by him. And they look at each other and they say, isn't this the carpenter? Isn't he the son of Mary? Like, we know this guy. We helped change his diaper. We watched him grow up. Like, who is this? And they just brush him off. It's incredible. You brushed him off. King Herod, the highest ranking people in the land, heard about him because the Bible says, quote, everyone was talking about him. Wherever he went, it says villages, cities, or the countryside, people would bring their sick friends to have them healed by Jesus. Wherever he went. There was a couple instances where he tried to hide where he was going. He talked to his disciples, and he wanted to go by himself, and he was trying to go in private, so he could have a moment to himself, because people were bombarding him so often that they didn't have time to eat. Right? You think you're busy. People were in such need of Jesus that he and his disciples had no time to eat, because people were always flooding where they were. It was a pretty fun time. Jesus is out doing stuff. It was pretty fun. And here's my favorite one. After healing a deaf man. Okay? We have it up on the screen. Mark chapter 7, 36 and 37. It says that Jesus told the crowd not to tell anyone. But the more he told them not to, the more they spread the news. Classic people. They were completely amazed and said again and again, everything he does is wonderful. He even makes the deaf to hear and gives speech to those who cannot speak. Imagine if this was happening today. When was the last time you were completely amazed? For whatever that actually means. To be completely amazed by something. It says that everyone who was around Jesus, they were completely amazed. And person to person, the constant conversation that you would hear is everything he does is wonderful. Everything he does is wonderful. If Jesus shows up tonight and you ask to be healed, you ask to experience him, and everyone in this room experiences him, what you would hear walking through the crowd is different people speaking just like this and saying, everything he does is wonderful. I used to be riddled with anxiety and worried everywhere I go, and then I prayed and I asked him to take it from me, and I trust him, and it's gone. Everything he does is wonderful. And then you leave here and you go back to your dorm or your apartment, and as you walk down and you pass the doors, you hear people over and over again saying, everything he does is wonderful. Everything he does is wonderful. I had this horrible pain in my knee that's been terrible for months. Doctors can't fix it. And I prayed, I asked him to heal me, and he's healed me. And my knee is great. Everything he does is wonderful. Can you imagine that? It says again and again, over and over again, people were saying to one another, everything he does is wonderful. And they'd share a testimony of something they've experienced or something they've seen him do for somebody else. So this is the end of chapter 7 of Mark. So as we get into chapter 8, we experience a massive plot twist in the ministry of Jesus. Up to this point, the disciples have been with him for 2.5 years. It's a long time to be with somebody, right? And they were around college age. Okay? So if you're in college 2.5 years, like halfway through junior year, you kind of know how things are going, nothing really shocks you anymore, you like get the system, you know how it's going on. And they've been with Jesus, healing people, casting out demons, preaching these amazing sermons and teachings, and they're just like riding high, man. Like, we're just cruising, this is it. And then we get to the end of Mark chapter 8 and verse 27. And this is what it says. Jesus and his disciples left Galilee and went up to the villages near Caesarea Philippi. As they were walking along, he asked them, who do people say that I am? Well, they replied, some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah, and others say you're one of the other prophets. Then he asked them, but who do you say that I am? Peter replied, you are the Messiah. But Jesus warned them not to tell anyone about him. So to catch why exactly this is a plot twist, we need a little bit more context. Ready to dig in a little bit with me? That sound good? So it says they left Galilee, right? So they leave one place and they're heading to Caesarea Philippi. And this place is located at the base of Mount Hermon. We've got a picture of it, modern day. This is kind of like an aerial view of it. And Mount Hermon is pretty cool. It's actually the start of the Jordan River. And water comes straight out of the mountain. So this is aerial. Imagine if you're at the bottom. If you look up, it's this huge mountain. And then about a 40-foot wide waterfall just is coming out of the mountain. It's pretty incredible. Pretty beautiful sight. And like a lot of natural phenomena that are beautiful, it attracted a lot of superstition, pagan worship, cults, all sorts of weird stuff. Because we are made to worship, and we tend to worship things we find beautiful. And so a lot of people worshiped at this mountain. And it's kind of hard to see, well, you can't see it on here, but toward the bottom, like at ground level of this mountain, there were a bunch of caves, and within those caves, they would carve little alcoves, and they would put different gods and goddesses and idols at the bottom to worship them. There was all sorts of weird superstition about it. You know, people making up all sorts of crazy stories like, oh, this Greek god, he cried one day, and the tear became the River Jordan. You know, stuff like that, fairy tale type things. And at this base, there were two gods in particular. One was the Greek god Pan. There's a really weird picture of him right here. As far as I can tell, no relation to Peter Pan. Kind of looks like Mr. Tumnus. Sorry, Mr. Tumnus, no disrespect. This is the Greek god Pan, and he was rumored to be a god who actually came down to be a man. And on the other side, there was a statue of Caesar, the Roman emperor at the time. And so we're here in Caesarea Philippi, and it's got its name because one of Herod's sons was named Philip, and like a humble man, he named the city that he's been given after himself and after the Roman emperor. It's kind of cool. We got Caesarea Philippi. And so Jesus takes his guys to this place to ask them this question of, who do men say that I am, and who do you say that I am? So he brings them to this mountain with all this pagan worship. And they see this God who rumored to become a man, and they see a man who is rumored to become a God, and he looks at them and he says, what about me? Who do you say that I am? His first question, who do people say that I am? Well, they give a few different answers. They say, well, you know, some say John the Baptist, Jeremiah, maybe Ezekiel, maybe Hosea, maybe Joel. Because you must have lived before. You're so wise. And you're so brilliant. But yet you're in your 30s. You're so young. There's no way you just have this wisdom about you. There's no way. So you had to have lived before. And then Peter gets it. He gets the revelation. And he thinks to himself, yes, you did live before. But you didn't live down here. You lived up there. You've always lived. You've always been. You're before everything. You've made everything. You are the Messiah. Your Bible might say you are the Christ. The Greek word is Christos, literally, where we get Christ from. He makes his declaration, you are the Christ, you are the Messiah. And Messiah literally means anointed one. It's a title. If you know, if Jesus had a birth certificate, it wouldn't say Jesus Christ on it. Like if he had a driver's license, it wouldn't say Christ, Jesus. Like that wasn't his last name, it was a title. And it means Messiah. It means the anointed one. He's the one that they've been waiting for thousands of years to come and deliver God's people. They've been waiting for years, and here it is. He is him. You know what I'm saying? He's that dude. He's him. And at that declaration, we have this major plot twist. Because of this declaration by Peter, Jesus says for the very first time that he is going to be betrayed and crucified and die and rise again. This is the first time. They've been with him for 2.5 years, following him, seeing all this happen. And it's not until 2.5 years later he drops this bomb on them. This major plot twist. But he brings them to Caesarea Philippi to do it. Isn't that cool? That's the question. Who do men say that I am? Who do you say that I am? And these two questions Jesus asked his disciples are the same questions he asked C.S. Lewis 100 years ago. It's the same two questions he asked me back in 2010. And it's the same questions he's asking you tonight by his Spirit. He's asking you, who do you say that I am? Not who your parents say that I am. Not even who the guy with the microphone, is telling you who he is. Who do you say that I am? By Peter's declaration that you are the Christ, you are the Messiah, and Jesus' affirmation of it to reveal the plan to him, he is confirming and affirming that he is not Buddha, he's not Muhammad, he's not Krishna, he's not the flying spaghetti monster. He is the Christ. He is not a liar or a lunatic like Lewis thought about. He is the Christ. He is not out of his mind or possessed by Satan. He is the Christ. He is not Pan. He's not Caesar. He's not John the Baptist. He's not Ezekiel, Jeremiah, Joel, Hosea. He is the Christ, the Son of the living God. And he has come as the anointed one to save the world. He has come to save you from your selfishness and my selfishness. And these names matter. That he is Messiah. The way that you choose to respond to God, by what name you choose to respond to him, makes all the difference in your life. It will change your life forever, just like it changed my life forever. And if you know Jesus, it changed your life forever. This Jesus, just even speaking historically, y'all know that as a culture, we define our entire timeline of human existence based off when Jesus lived on this earth. You think about that, BC and AD, like before Christ, after death. You realize that? Like we used that. He was so significant in history that we have defined our entire existence as like he was the crux moment. And that's not an American thing, right? Like we're a couple hundred years old. Like this isn't some like red, white, and blue, patriotic, like our Jesus stamp of approval. Like this is what the world agreed upon thousands of years ago. That this Jesus was so impactful. He was so significant that we cannot just write him off. Does that make sense? What you believe about him is a powerful thing. In Mark 6, verse 5, it says, because of their unbelief, Jesus couldn't do any miracles among them except to place his hands on a few sick people and heal them. But it says that he was amazed at their unbelief. He was amazed that people did not believe in him, even with all that they were seeing and hearing with their own eyes and their own hands. And tonight, you can choose to not believe in Jesus and remain how you are. Whatever it is you're struggling with, whether you're blind, physically or spiritually, deaf, sick, demon-possessed, hurting, broken, anxious, wherever you might be, whatever sickness you have, whatever need that you have in your life, you can continue to not believe in him and not trust in him. And it says right here, even while he was there, he was limited in what he could do for people. But all that came to him, absolutely, all that came to him were healed. All that came to him were changed forever. Just like in this room, if you've encountered Jesus, you have a BC life and you have an AD life, right? And you can have that tonight. You can choose to believe in him. You can choose to trust him. And if you want to do that, I'm not even going to lead you in how to respond. I want you to hear these words straight from the Messiah, from the Savior himself. If you want to believe in him, you want to follow him, this is what he says. He calls the crowd to join in with his already followers. And he says this, if any of you wants to be my follower, you must give up your own way, take up your cross, and follow me. If you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake and for the sake of the good news, you will save it. And what do you benefit if you gain the whole world but lose your own soul? Is anything worth more than your soul? If anyone is ashamed of me and my message in these adulterous and sinful days, the Son of Man will be ashamed of that person when he returns in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. If you want to be set free tonight, if you want to encounter Jesus tonight, this is what he says. Give up your own way. You're not smart enough, you're not wise enough to run your own life. None of us are. It's a burden that you were never made to bear. It will crush you. And he says, lovingly, give up your own way. Take up your cross, meaning crucify your old self. That old self is done away with. And lastly, he says to follow him. Follow in his ways. Obey his teachings. Obey his commandments. And if that's a scary thought to do alone, it's okay. You've got a few friends here who will help you do that. So we're going to worship Jesus in song here in a second. And as we are, I just ask you, please, to be honest with God. Wherever you are. Don't feel like you need to respond a certain way to appease anybody, even yourself. Please don't feel that way. Don't feel a pressure to respond a certain way. But really, talk to God. He's alive. Jesus rose. He's alive, and he'll hear you, and he'll listen, and he will talk back. So if you need to find a place in the room, if you want to find a place at the front or on the side or at your seat, do that. But be honest with God.